Thank you, first of all, for coming, and I've already done all the commercials, so we can go ahead with the talk. What I intend to do is to tell you sort of the who, what, when, and where of petroglyphs. And just keep in mind, I'm not an archaeologist or an anthropologist. I'm a librarian by trade. But I like doing research, and we have all these, we have great information here in this museum about petroglyphs, and it's a shame that people just don't get to see them. So that was sort of the idea behind doing this. So I'm going to tell you everything I know about them today. So I thought I'd start with defining the word. Petroglyph means rock carvings. The word petro means rock, and glyph means symbol. So these are where rock is removed from rock to make a design. And it can be something as simple as lines and dots and just little simple images, or they can be something much more elaborate, like drawings of humans or animals or supernatural creatures and even astronomical signs. So they're found throughout the world, and some of them date far back tens of thousands of years ago. Petroglyphs actually remove part of the rock to make their design. Pictoglyphs, so not to confuse the two, is something that is applied to the rock. And usually it's natural pigments and painting and put onto the rock. So the oldest known mention of our upper Ohio Valley petroglyphs was on August 3rd, 1749. And we have two mentions of it, one by a commander, one by a chaplain, that were part of a French expedition down here from Canada to lay claim to some territory here. So the commander said this, an immense stone upon which certain figures were rudely enough carved. The chaplain went a little further and was a little more descriptive and wrote, get my notes down here so I can see a little better. So he says, a great rock upon which were to be seen several figures roughly graven. These were the figures of men and women, and the footprints of goats, turkeys, bears, etc., traced upon the rock. Our officers tried to persuade me that this was the work of Europeans, but in truth I must say that in style and workmanship of these engravings, one cannot fail to recognize the unskillfulness of savages. I might add to this that they have much analogy with the hieroglyphics that they use instead of writing. Now, he wasn't referring to any of the ones that we're going to talk about today. He was actually referring to what was known as Indian Rock or God Rock, which is closer to Pittsburgh on the Ohio. The petroglyphs we're going to talk about today are the ones starting at Midland and going downriver about 10 miles. But they were also noticed by some of these early settlers. The carvings near East Liverpool must have impressed Lewis Evans enough that he included it on this 1775 map of North America. There's a spot along the Ohio there, and it says location of antique sculptures. You can't see it on this map, but it is written on it. So that became a landmark, those antique sculptures being the petroglyphs at Babbs Island, where traders and surveyors could make their way into Ohio country. You know, later as the towns developed and grew, the citizens knew about the petroglyphs here, and they were something of a tourist attraction. We read stories of people having picnics when the water would be low enough, taking picnic baskets out to the petroglyphs or just out to walk among the art carvings. We know that school groups walked among the petroglyphs. And as always, there's always that one person that has to carve their name in the ancient art, as you see on this one. So somebody has put their initials on this one.
We know what the white is? That
yes, that's actually chalk in there to make that show up better. Yeah. We got somebody coming. Pause a second. Hello, come on in. Hi.
Hello.
Fine.
Sorry we're late.
That's all right. You haven't missed much. I'm here, Martha. If you can see, we don't mind waiting. If you need to go higher, it's all right. You've only missed 2 or 3 slides. 3. So how is it that a museum of ceramics, come on in. Yeah, hi, come on in. Hello.
Appreciate your service.
So how is it that the Museum of Ceramics has a collection of petroglyph tracings, photographs, negatives, and other documents? Well, this is Harold Barth. Harold Barth was born in 1885 and passed away in 1974. He was really the custodian of the East Liverpool Historical Society's collections. And he collected for many, many years. As you walk through this museum and look in the cases, a great proportion of what you see in our cases was collected by Barth over the years. But in 1908, a very young, a 24-year-old Barth undertook a project that would be very significant. He photographed 5 different sites along the Ohio River and made casts and full-size tracings of the art. He would gather up as many workers as he could to go help him, and most of those names are lost to us who those workers were. But he did credit Reverend W. W. Burton of Alliance, Ohio, as being the photographer of a lot of the photographs that were taken in 1908. So the places he went to, one is not listed there, and that's Midland. And the reason I didn't list it is we don't own any tracings from the Midland petroglyphs. And what I saw in Swager's book, and I'll talk about Swager in a few minutes, there was only 2 or 3 tracings from there. So I've just left it out of this. He went to Smith's Ferry here north of East Liverpool, the Babbs Island petroglyphs, the Wellsville or Dam 8 or Yellow Creek petroglyphs, they're all the same, and Brown's Island, which is near Weirton. So Barth undertook this project in 1908. It took him a year, so he worked on 1908 and 1909. And the impetus for doing this project was the construction of a wicket dam that was to be built along the Ohio. Now, I knew nothing about wicket dams before, and I still don't know a lot, but I find them fascinating. So I think the next 4 slides are about wicket dams. So humor me with this, because I just thought they were really interesting. So this dam became known as Dam 8, and I'm going to describe a wicket dam for you here. They were made up of several small wooden structures connected together to make a semi-solid dam to back up the river. Especially in the summertime when our larger barges and boats were going, the river could be very shallow in the summer months. The dam sections were raised 1 section at a time by a crew of workers on a ship known as a maneuvering boat. At the base of these wickets in the river was a concrete base, and it supported each of the wooden wickets. Water pressure helped flip the wicket over, and a 4-inch pipe locked the dam in place. The Dam 8 here along our Ohio had its opening over on the West Virginia side so that boats could go through, pass through. That dam was built in 1910, and it was used in New Cumberland until 1959. So you see in your picture there, the top picture is a maneuvering boat, and below it are some wickets out of the water. So here's a wicket dam on the Ohio, but it's not ours. I couldn't find a picture of the wicket dam in its entirety like this. So you can see the maneuvering boat and the small sections of it. There's still remnants of Dam 8 here along the Ohio. The photograph you see on the left is Kennedy's Landing down below Nome before New Cumberland, and you see that sort of wall there. Next to it is a photograph on the Ohio. So that's looking north, that picture. That's looking towards East Liverpool from the south. The next picture is looking south and towards Wellsville. And you can see the remnants of it on the Ohio side. And if you're interested in wicket dams, Hannibal Locks and Dam River Park has a maneuvering boat and wickets that you could go down and see. Hello, come on in, have a seat. We can move that box there if you would like to sit there.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Okay. So, and Hannibal was across the river from New Martinsville. So the building of the Dam 8 was important for a couple of reasons. First of all, it inspired Barth to go out and do his work before the dam was built. And secondly, everyone knew that those petroglyphs along the area of Dam 8 would be gone after the dam was built. It's actually said that the petroglyphs were destroyed by the construction of the dam, but it's probably just as likely that they're just underwater, so we don't really know which that is. At Dam 8, the petroglyphs were carved into a sandstone ledge, which is true of all the ones we're going to talk about, and that is of the Allegheny series of Pennsylvania periods. So they were on the riverbank on the Ohio side, and they were between East Liverpool and Wellsville. So when Barth's data that he recorded for this, he recorded that it was in Yellow Creek Township of Columbiana County. So hence the names, they were called Wellsville or Yellow Creek or Dam 8. And most historians now like them to be referred to as Dam 8 petroglyphs. They are not inside the city proper of Wellsville. They're before you get to the city. So Dam 8 is actually a more accurate term, even though Dam 8 is no longer there. So the petroglyphs you're going to be seeing on screen are from Dam 8 site. And if you want to see them here in the museum, we have placed, only have a couple of these. We only have two actually, and they are out near the gift shop where you came in. This is one of the ones that's out there. And James Swagger, I'll talk about him in a minute. I've already mentioned him once. He labeled these petroglyphs in his book, and he labeled this one simply as human. But he states that the lines emanating from the head of the person here are probably power lines rather than feathers or hair as one might think they are. Power lines indicate a superior person. So this item is, or this person here is holding what is likely some sort of ceremonial piece. So one thing I found is that the archaeologists were real cautious about labeling the petroglyphs. Unless they knew for sure what a symbol stood for, they sort of leave it open because they don't want to, color your judgment or somebody's in the future when they find something about it. So they're really reluctant to tell you what all the things are on them. So in some cases, you get to decide. So, and some of the petroglyphs, as you'll see when you go out, are really open to debate of what they are. But this one is pretty obvious. This is a rattlesnake. The forked tongue on the left may be simply that, or the lines might be also power lines. Power lines indicate that the figure portrayed is a person of significance or power, maybe such as a shaman. And often this person is in touch with the spiritual world. Serpents were often associated with the spiritual world. Now, in looking at this too, we have to think about what it was like at the time these were drawn. And the area here was primarily forest, very heavily wooded, and with lots of brush and undergrowth under those forests. Agriculture came late here because clearing those forests was really a challenge. So what we find is the Native Americans who are here are hunters for mostly their food. And Swagger said this about the area at that time. Not everything in the environment was useful or friendly to the Indians. The most dangerous animal in the country was the rattlesnake, followed closely by the copperhead. So this one again is more humans. Head projections could be hair, feathers, or more likely they could be power lines. So I've mentioned Swagger a couple times. He wrote a book called Rock Art of the Upper Ohio Valley in 1974, and that is pretty much the Bible of petroglyphs for our area. So he had written a lot of articles on it, done a lot of research. He was associate director at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. His field of study was anthropology, but he just had a curiosity about the petroglyphs and spent a lot of his time working with them. Many of the drawings that you've seen in this slideshow are from his publication. Even though we house hundreds of photographs and negatives of the petroglyphs, I found these drawings to be easier to see the actual image. So I chose to use them. I'll show you some photographs too, but I just think they're so much clearer. So I used the ones from his book rather than the actual photographs. All of the research and the photographs in his book that he used were from Harold Barth. Swagger visited every site with Barth, and by the way, we are still looking at Dam 8 petroglyphs. He was able to visit every site with Barth in 1940 except the Dam 8 one because of the Wicket Dam, it was gone. The others were all at low water there, and he got to see the others. He cataloged all the negatives and notes from Barth for his research, and he credited Barth in all of his books repeatedly. And upon Barth's death in '74, he donated one of his books to Carnegie Public Library and signed it in memory of Mr. Barth. Mr. Swager passed away in 2005 at the age of 92. So now we're going to switch to Smith's Ferry. And this is a photograph from 1908 of a boy at Smith's Ferry. Barth used kind of an unorthodox method in his efforts to preserve these. In 1908, when he started, he took a crew of people, and they started by cleaning the sites, removing all the debris, silt, cleaning out the petroglyphs. And then they poured printer's ink and liquid dryer into the grooves made. Over that, they would put a sheet of absorbent paper, and then that made the tracing. So take a good look at this dog. And by the way, it's one of the ones we do have, and it's probably the biggest one we have. So there's the dog, and here it is the drawing in Swager's book. And you see that all of Barth's tracings are reversed because of the way he made them. So what we're looking at here was actually in reverse on the rock. So Barth made over 200 imprints of them, of which we have about 35. Although the Smith's Ferry petroglyphs, I think, are some of the most interesting, and actually we have more of them than of any of the other sites, they were seldom available to be seen. Even as early as 1902, we've seen documents that say that people were saying the water is seldom low enough to see them. They're only visible every 6 or 7 years. A Pittsburgh article in 1924 said they hadn't been seen in 20 years. Now we know this isn't true because Barth was there tracing them in 1908, but it does verify that sightings of the Smith's Ferry petroglyphs were very rare. Despite the appearances of how these look in here, they look very clear. Petroglyphs are often very difficult to see on the rock. So the grooves are less than 3/8 of an inch deep, and the width of the grooves is less than an inch. So they recommend that if you were to go see the petroglyphs, you go early morning or early afternoon, late afternoon I should say. So the slant of the sun's rays made shadows so you could spot them. Many times you could walk right past the petroglyphs and not notice they were there. So, as Bill had asked, in some of the photographs you saw, they look very crisp and clean, but that's the white chalk that was put in them so that they would become visible. So take a look at this man. You're going to see him again here on the next slide. So on the left is the one you saw earlier. This is the one that has the graffiti on it. So we do have photographs like that, and we also have some diagrams that Barth himself made with measurements. So this is the same one with all of measurements on it. So these are kind of the documents we have here in our archives. So how were the petroglyphs made? Well, they were created by using stones harder than the rock. The rock is sandstone, and sometimes sandstone can be soft enough that they could start out at least by incising them and using stone chisels. But then they probably would switch to a harder stone and use direct percussion and even some indirect percussion to make these grooves. So now we're going to switch to the Browns Island petroglyphs and talk about why they were made. Petroglyphs are a form of symbolic communication, and their message was important. And that's a key phrase there. Their message was important. We now know that they were not a form of prehistoric graffiti, as was originally thought. And there's a couple things to think about in that context. First of all, for Native Americans to carve these sometimes huge petroglyphs with stone tools, hand tools, required way too much effort for it just to be done if it wasn't done for some serious intention. The locations where they were found were probably important locations, maybe even sacred locations. And those places were important prior to the petroglyphs being put there. Sometimes they may be marking a pathway somewhere, or an edge of a tribe, or a place where ceremonies happened. They probably also formalized and verified their beliefs. So in some ways, some of these are there as teaching tools. So younger generations of the Native Americans would know the stories, the cultures, and beliefs of this tribe. I've lost my cursor here, and I can't get it to move down through my notes. Sorry. Here. That's not what I wanted. Let's see if I can do this. Nope. All right. So, and the images and designs that the petroglyphs are made of were probably common in their society. This is not a one-time drawing. This is probably the same drawings that they put into their baskets and carved into leather or tree trunks and bark. Unfortunately, those kind of things don't survive, so we don't know that because this is hundreds of years ago, and all of those things have disappeared. But we do have some things like pottery that survives. On this Hopewell, a bowl from the Hopewell culture, you can see a duck-billed serpent, and that was something that we also saw in some of the petroglyphs. So someone said the petroglyphs were just the tip of the artistic iceberg of the artwork that they would do. There's also another thing that's really kind of unique about the petroglyphs, and it's that this is one time where they could be, when they were visible, visited in the same place where they were created. And seldom is that true with some of the artifacts. We know this is where it happened. We're still on Browns Island petroglyphs. If you want to see the Browns Island petroglyphs here that we have laid out, they are on the opposite side. The way you come in, most of you come in along the Broadway side. They're on the 5th Street side of the museum. So this one too, like the others, they're carved in sandstone, and it's from the Allegheny series of Pennsylvania period. Browns Island is near Weirton, close to the West Virginia side. It is possible that these were all destroyed when the channel was deepened along here. But again, we don't know for sure. They could simply just be underwater. The Browns Island petroglyphs seem to have a really high percentage of bird images. I don't have any reasoning for that. It's something that's been noted. This is one of the tracings that you will see over on the other side if you go over there. So who made the petroglyphs? Swagger suggests that they were made by Monongahela man, which is sort of Proto-Shawnees. The Monongahela culture were Native Americans of the late woodland peoples, and they were in the area from AD 1050 to 1635. Now, the culture was named this by Mary Butler in 1939 for the peoples who were around the Mon River, and so she gave them that name for the Monongahela River. In other words, these people didn't call themselves the Monongahelas. This was a name that was given to them. Still others believe that they were created a little later than that, in more of a historic time rather than prehistoric. And those inhabitants could have been Wyandot, Shawnee, Mingo, or Delaware. I included this slide just to show you some of the ones I've been showing you are pretty clear as to what they are, what the image depicts. But there are many of these that we don't know what the image depicts. So it's your guess. It's your interpretation on a lot of these. The next one I'm going to show you, though, I found an interesting paragraph in Swagger's book that I thought was kind of amusing, and it was about this one. Here's what he wrote. Naming petroglyph designs can become embarrassing for the namer who reconsiders his work. Resisting the temptation to call design number 13 a Ford tri-motored airplane, I labeled it as a three-headed bird and published it as such. I now believe it and other winged creatures such as design number 3 and design number 45, which I originally labeled human flying and published as such, are now more properly called mythological creatures. But this one is kind of eerie, isn't it? It's just almost like a prediction of the future or something. It looks so much like an airplane. So here you see another one from So I think I have this one labeled as Babs Island, and I actually think it might be Browns Island. I'm going to have to double check. We have it over with the Browns Island ones, I believe. So I'll have to check on, I think it is Browns Island. But I have here the drawing from Swager's book, and one of the photographs we have in our collection that Barth took. And it's a photograph of the tracing that you will see out there. But you can really see, though, why I chose to show you the line drawings. I just think they're clearer to see. The next series of ones you're going to see are Babs Island's one. So, now, the Babs Island petroglyphs were not on Babs Island. They were on the Ohio shore. And they were actually closer to where the city's wharf is today than the Babs Island. But they were given that name. So another question is, when were the petroglyphs made? And petroglyphs are really difficult to date. In Africa and Europe, they could be tens of thousands of years old. In our area, they're considered fairly recent. Most people believe they date from the late prehistoric period. That's considered to be AD 900 to 1650, and it refers to the time immediately before the Europeans came into Ohio country. They base this on the symbols that were seen in a lot of the petroglyphs show up in other sites of the same time period and the same typical kind of art. So others believe that they may be more recent than that, and think that they could have been up until the 1700s here. So one of the things they've used to attribute these is the belief that these American tribes believed in also a lot of the same spiritual beliefs, such as the thunderbird and the serpents and the things that they see in others here. So dating is kind of difficult, but most say that they're less than 1,000 years old. And even though that's thought of as recent, sounds pretty old to me. So here's some things, though, to consider when dating them. So if they're less than 1,000 years old, the one thing we do know about them is we think they were all the sites you've seen, the 4 sites you've seen, were created in a fairly short period of time, because the same symbols and the same kind of drawings are repeated amongst them. The style of them, at least, is very similar. And the other thing is that the markings don't show any great difference in age based on erosion for them. So another thing that we think that they're made within the same time period. Like I said, we know that they're similar to what was used by other Native Americans in other places that we have dated to the recent past. And this relatively young age of the petroglyphs here is really in contrast to some throughout the United States, especially that in the southwestern United States. Those are much, much older than the petroglyphs that are here. So where are these petroglyphs today? Elsewhere in the country, there's different places, even in Ohio, where you can see petroglyphs. But here, ours are all underwater. So with the creation of the Wicket dams, the one near Wellsville was made in 1910, but by the 1920s, there were other Wicket dams up and down the Ohio River. After the Wicket dams, there was a few times when you could still see them, even though that there were dams here. After the 1920s, there were 3 occasions that the petroglyphs showed up: 1940, 1948, and 1958. And that's just because water levels had receded to a point where the images were exposed. Here you see Harold Barth at the Babs Island site, and I believe that is the kills of C.C. Thompson behind him. So that might give you a sense, those of you that know those things, of where those petroglyphs were located. So, and here's another shot of them. Barth noted at this time that erosion with the moving river had really made many of the known petroglyphs almost invisible. So there was many they couldn't find. And if you notice here, though, there was a lot of still ice there, and that could have been the reason too. but having known the locations, there were just many that they could no longer see. So it was reported, though, especially up at Smith's Ferry, where they were visible, and that was kind of rare. And like I said, I think some of the Smith's Ferry ones are some of the most interesting ones, that really thousands of onlookers went to this, the stone outcrops there, where the Little Beaver spills into the Ohio. And so all of these petroglyphs, the last time they were seen was 1958. So I need Jen. Let me see, she must be out front here. She has one she wanted to show you, but I think she's going to miss this. So anyway, by the late 1950s, the super dams were added on the Ohio River, and the river rose even higher. The petroglyphs now are probably under about 15 feet of water. So with Elmsworth, Dashields, Montgomery, and New Cumberland Lock and dams, it's unlikely that anyone will see these petroglyphs again. Thank you for coming. Questions, comments? Yes.
Is there any effort to preserve what you have now? I notice there's a lot of flaking and so forth on.
Yeah, we were talking about that today. This is actually the first time that we've opened them. We had a volunteer who opened them a while back to write some finding aids for them. But except for a few times when people have been doing research, we have not opened them up. So today when I opened them, and the ones I had seen that were open were in pretty good shape. Mm-hmm. Today when I put them out, for some reason it seems like the Babs Island ones are in the worst shape. Yes, they're in bad shape, and we plan to contact some preservationists and see if we can at least make copies of them before they deteriorate to where they're lost. I mean, there's certainly photographs, and I know Carnegie Museum of Natural History has casts of some of them, but I don't think there's any full-size drawings of them anywhere else. Now, it was said that he made 200 of them. We have about 35. I don't know where the others are. So they may be at Carnegie. I'm not sure. So good question. And you think like I do. I was thinking the same thing today. We need to save these. Yes.
Well, excuse me. The Babs Island one, that looked like, were they actually on Babs Island or were they across from Babs Island?
They're across from Babs Island.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you're really interested in them, Swager's book, which is available now on CD, and that's how I have it. They reprinted it 2008, I think. It was from 1974. He has a second book too, but he gives all the coordinates if anybody really wanted to go to the exact site or find it. That is known information. So is that Jen?
Did they have an excited and enthusiastic
Yeah, so
crowd?
we were going to end this by saying we hope you look at all the petroglyphs. And this gentleman in this petroglyph found my slideshow to be very exciting. I hope you found that it was exciting as well.
Oh my God.
Probably not as exciting as he did.
Yes. And he's a Browns Island one as well, I
Yes.
believe? Yes. So I told you the Browns Island one was the most interesting. No, I like the ones at Smith's Ferry, actually.
Those are fun.
Is he Smith's Ferry? I can't remember where this one's from.
At the very bottom.
Is it on there? Yeah, Browns Island. So, but these are laying throughout the museum on the floor. We didn't open all. We have more from. We have more from Smith's Ferry than anywhere, and we didn't have room to put them all out. We have all of the Babs Island, all of Dam 8, and all of Browns Island that we own on display. So, yes, Bill.
A couple things about Bart from what I've heard. He was born on the property
Yes.
where the the Carnegie Library is located, and he was going up the steps and died on the same piece of property.
That is true. Yes.
And he also had sort of a curmudgeon type of attitude. He borrowed many pieces of pottery from local people, and somehow they never found their way back.
They're suddenly in our collection.
And
Squatters' rights kind of thing.
when Harker was, in 1965, was going to make reproductions of the hound-handled jugs, he would not let anybody touch them, so they had to more or less do their drawings looking through glass.
Hadn't heard that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, he was quite the character. We mention his name every day here, Zoe, and we also think he haunts the museum at times. But I am really amazed at the age of 24 he had the foresight to go do this with these petroglyphs. I think that, And the information he got would have been lost for eternity, because within a year, most of them were underwater, so. Yes,
Great.
Mary Martha.
I'm wondering if you know about the man named Thompson. It's not related to me, but Joan Witt gave
Dick
me
Thompson.
a book to read,
Mhm.
and I gave it back to her. It was made in the 80s, I think.
That's probably, I bet you that's Swagger's book. It was published in
His name
'74.
was Thompson, though.
Oh, okay, you're talking about Dick Thompson, I
Yeah,
believe?
he made some plaster casts
did.
in 1958, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Yes.
copied some pages of it wasn't an actual book, it was like a report.
Uh-huh.
That's not the right word, but that
Yeah.
he'd written up on
And is it
Site
here?
11.
Is it here or in your collection?
This is probably where I would have copied it.
Yeah. We have a pretty extensive collection. There's stuff in it yet that I haven't even discovered. I've got to the photograph. You may have a copy of that.
Well,
I would actually like to have a copy of
I
that.
think that the Thompson book was belonged to the Historical Society.
Probably.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think.
There's another one
Brooks
for you to
probably
put on
knows
CD.
about where it is.
Was he
Yeah.
an artifact collector?
He
I
was.
don't know anything
he
about
was-
him. He's not my family.
Okay, I don't know. Does anybody know him better than I do? I just know
I
him.
went to a couple lectures that he gave when he was alive, and he was very, very knowledgeable
Yes.
of Native Americans and where they came from and the types of tools that they left behind,
Yeah.
the stones and the different arrowheads and so forth.
Okay. Yeah, when I
Was he a member of the Aboriginal Explorers
I
Society?
believe he might have been, yes.
Yeah, I bet he
Yeah.
was.
His son is Stuart Thompson, if anybody knows Stuart.
Okay. I knew him when the museum first opened. I worked here for the first 5 years, and Dick was a regular visitor in here then. And Tim knows all about him. We could get this information from Tim. And he was quite the collector, and he was just knowledgeable about many aspects of local history. So, yeah, I would like to
He
see.
became unable to speak in later years,
That's
and
right.
for a while he was the treasurer of the Historical Society, although, from what I'm told, Tim Brooks' wife basically really did it.
Oh.
And he was 2 treasurers before I took over
Yeah.
the treasurer's job.
A very nice man. I
Yeah,
remember him as
he
being
was.
a wonderful person. Yeah. So, other questions?
So,
Yes.
When you talk about the Midland versus the Smiths Ferry,
Yeah. I don't know
Where's
exactly
the
where the
difference?
Midland site was, to be
because there was one
honest.
right below the mill.
That's probably. I wouldn't doubt that that's it. Because there was.
It's sort of between Smiths Ferry and,
Yeah. I could find that out, but I don't know right off. When I saw that in Swagger's book, I think he only has 3 drawings, and 2 of them are just kind of like remnants of a drawing. And then when we didn't have any, I just didn't pursue that anymore.
yeah, I went just before they built the new dams in '58, we went down there. You could get down, you cross the railroad tracks right below Midland there,
Yeah,
and you go down and there were thousands of people wandering around.
that's probably where it was.
That was
then.
like right before they
And
raised the water about 8 feet.
I don't know if there were more, maybe there were more there and they only did 3 tracings, or why they only have so few. Or Swagger has another book out, and maybe there's more in it. I didn't consult it, I just used the 1974 one. I think we had one after that too, so
There's a
volume
book,
2.
Petroglyphs of Ohio,
Yes.
published by University of Ohio Press.
Okay,
It's
I've seen that. I haven't consulted that, but I know of its existence, yeah.
Well, I say great job.
Well, thank you.